Howdy, Possum Patty and Little Miss Titi here. And what is the journal play for today? Well, I am working on the signatures for my Awesome Possum Journal. And I hope to get the signatures sewn in and get that all completed today. So while I do that, there just may be a story or two, so come on along. This is what I've done so far. I have cut some very pretty scrapbooking paper. Isn't this gorgeous? And look at the colors. Look at this. Isn't that beautiful? This is paper from Pretty Petals, the paper studio. So that would be Hobby Lobby. I did not buy this new though. I got this at the flea market. It smells a little musty, but I'll air it out. But it has some beautiful papers in it. And I picked out the ones with the colors that look absolutely gorgeous with this. So I have this gorgeous paper. And what am I mixing it with? Brown paper bag. So I sat here for a little while and I started cutting up some brown paper bags. And I wanted to mix the brown paper bag with the beautiful papers from that paper pack. Isn't that gorgeous? So that's what I'm working on. And I also have this card that was gifted to me, and it says, "You're awesome, Possum." That's what I named the journal, the Awesome Possum Journal. And she left it blank so that I can put it in here. And this was made by Lucy. And I cut up a few of the pages from the book I was gifted, Possum's Harvest Moon. I know it's a beautiful book, but you know, I read it and it's a wonderful story how Possum wants to celebrate the harvest moon by having a big party for all her friends. But the friends are like, "Oh, we're kind of busy. It's time to hibernate. We're so tired from gathering up our food. We're ready to go to sleep." But they decided to join Possum for one last party before winter comes. So then Possum was happy. So it's a wonderful little story. And I love the illustrations. Look at the possum with the party hat on. Oh. So I cut some of them out. And look at the harvest moon with the firefly. And here's the paper. Now what I decided to do was take this brown paper bag paper and sew beautiful laces and trims onto it. You know, I want this to be a journal of contrast, right? So you've got this ordinary paper and the lace, and you've got this beautiful scrapbooking paper, and I believe this is like a Dollar Tree trim. If you hear any banging, that's probably Miss Stinky Winky Woos wants to come in. Look at this illustration from the book with the frogs and the crickets. And I thought that would be the center right there. So that's the first signature. On the second signature, I've got the bags ripped up. I've got some trim and some lace. Some of these really cute pictures on here. This one's got sparkle on it. And then in the center, all the animals are having a party. Love it, love it. Look at that. Uh-uh. So all I need is to cut up a couple pieces of this paper. And let's see what size. Oh, and I also put a ripped edge on the edge, decal. I like it called it a decal. I put a decal edge. Okay, I think I'm going to use the other page here. I need a little room to rip, but I have to cut it here. So, many years ago, a book was written called Possum Living by Dolly Freed. Now, Dolly Freed is not her real name. And I believe she wrote this book when she was very young. So Dolly Freed's book is called Possum Living, How to Live Well Without a Job and with almost no money. Now, she lived with her dad after her parents got divorced, and they had a small piece of property, I don't know, like a quarter of an acre or something, and they grew their own food and raised rabbits and chickens. And they had a creed, and this creed was, it's easier to learn to do without some of the things that money can buy than to earn the money to buy them. So it's an interesting read. There is a documentary of very, very, very poor quality. It's almost impossible to watch. I guess because it was old film made a long time ago. And actually shows her and her dad and their house and their chickens and their rabbits and how they went out and caught turtles to make dinner and all that stuff. And they bought only the bare essentials, things that they had to spend money on, like grains and sugars and a few things. And most of the stuff they got for free. And they did canning and, you know, canned their vegetables from their garden and everything. And her father would get like a part-time job when it was time to like pay taxes on the property or something. She dropped out of school when I guess she was in something like the 7th grade or something like that. And because she was just too stressed out. But apparently she was very, very smart, went to the library and was self-taught and applied to college, got into college and studied to be, aeronautical engineer or something like that. And so she was very, very smart and mostly self-taught. And did go to college, but like I said, this is her real name. And later in life, she actually became, I believe, an environmental educator, which is what I did later in life. And her father was an alcoholic, and so was mine. And I felt we had a lot in common, besides the name of the book, Possum Living. And not only did we have those things, where's my scissors? Have those things in common, but my father was also into certain kinds of possum living, let's call it. Possum living, living off the land. How can you live for free? So I gotta rip the edges on this a little bit. And we would go like fishing down the shore and catch a bucket of eels, and then we bring the eels home and we'd have them for dinner. And we'd be driving down the road and he'd pull the car over to the side of the road and jump down into the ditch, and I'd wonder what was he doing. And he was picking watercress out of the ditch and he'd bring it home, make some soup. Yeah, he believed in living off the land for sure. Kind of like what the people in this book were doing. Okay, do I have all my pages? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now the other one has 7 because of the card. Let's in the front. So there was another possum picture here. Oh, it's kind of small. What else do I have? The other papers are too thin. I could, does that fit on here? No. Guess I can add one little extra piece this side. Oh, you know what? I'm not going to make this a page because she wrote on the back and I want to put that in a pocket. All right, let me look around and see if there's one more thing I want to put in here. Okay, this is the possum card that I just received from Carol at Crinkled Path. And I have already photocopied this and put it in my nutty journal. But I like this little possum picture there. That is so cute. And I was thinking of maybe I can glue this down to here and then sew this in. And that would be the 7th page so that they both have 7. I love the embossed hearts on here. So maybe I'll cover the back of this, but leave those words over there. And then my 2 signatures would be done. And I'll be ready to sew them in. So I'm going to work on this card for a few minutes. And while I do that, I'm going to insert a story right here, right now. Let's get back to the book, Possum Living. Somebody asked Dolly Freed, not her real name, how did she come up with the title for Possum Living? And her answer was something like this. You know, sometimes Daddy frets and says, we are little better than possums living this way. Possums can live most anywhere, even in big cities. They're the stupidest of animals. But they were on Earth millions of years, millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of years before man ever appeared. And they are still going strong. They're all fat and sassy and seem to love life, or so I like to believe. And nothing you can do will persuade one to work in a factory or office. Possum living is what we call our life here and now. So very adaptive possums are. Now, possums are not the stupidest of creatures. Actual intelligence tests have been done on possums, and some of them score possums almost on the same par with pigs. Now, if you're familiar with animal intelligence tests, pigs rank higher than dogs. So this one test that I read about online is trying to tell me that possums are smarter than dogs. Well, if they have been in the same form that they are now on this earth for 65 or 70 million years, they got to be doing something right. People like to think they're stupid, but you know, they have outsurvived many. They have outlived the dinosaurs. There were possums back in the dinosaur days. Yes, there were. That is how old the possum species is. So I hope to put a passel of possums into my Awesome Possum Journal, and a passel is what you call a group of possums. I love collective nouns. I love collective nouns, and a group of possums is called a passel. So I'm going to put all kinds of possum facts and images and little things like this that friends send me into this little possum journal. That's my goal. That's my goal right there. So getting back now to my father, who I think was one of the princes of Possum Living. This notebook contains a story written by one of my father's good friends, Bernie Powell, and it is called An American Gothic. And it is a series of short stories, an anthology about my father and my grandfather, according to his memory. I know, because I was there, that he did not get all the facts straight. The stories are interesting and very colorful, but sometimes, no, that didn't happen, right? But it's still fun to read. And the subtitle of this is Tales by and of Her Native Sons Whose Moles Are Broken and Whose Time Has Fled in an America Before Political Correctness. But there are some really fun stories in here about my grandfather that I will probably read to you when I journal about my grandfather, right? Okay, this is part of a story that is titled The Beverly Hillbillies. Yes, The Beverly Hillbillies. And Chuck is my dad and Maggie is my mom. And the story begins, Chuck met Maggie walking one evening in Times Square. She had been born in Tennessee, a real mountain hillbilly with no schooling at all. I'm stopping right there. My mother was born in Manhattan. She was a city gal who never wore pants until she was like 17 years old, always wore a dress, always dressed nicely. And yes, she was a city gal. My mother attended the Julia Richmond High School in New York City, which was quite famous, and even Lauren Bacall went there when she was young. Lauren Bacall, the actress. Okay, let me get on with the story. Her father had stayed behind in the mountains with most of his brood. Well, first of all, no, her father wasn't in the mountains. He was in Manhattan with my mother and one sister. There was no brood. It was mom, her sister, and her father, and they lived in Manhattan. But Maggie, at around 16, I guess, had struck out for the bright lights and wound up in a rented room just off Times Square. Well, I'm going to skip ahead now to when Mom and Dad were married, and my brother and I, and Mom and Dad, we lived in a property in North Salem, Connecticut. Chuck and Maggie at the time were living in a gatehouse as semi-caretakers of the Watmore estate, way up in back of Greenwich, actually over in Brewster, New York. I remember it was just over the hill from Lake Wacabuck, or Twin Lakes, I think it is sometimes called, notable among other things as the lake in which P.T. Barnum disposed of the remains of Jumbo, America's first circus elephant. Now, why he put that in there, I have no idea. The elephant has nothing to do with the story. The deal that Chuck had smoked out was that if he and Maggie would provide some part-time services for the Watmore family, then they could live rent-free in the gatehouse. Now, the Watmores, I think Mr. Watmore was like president of the Waterman Pen Company or something like that at the time. To Chuck, who lived as cashless an existence as his father, though for different reasons, this seemed a great opportunity. He could continue to hold down his 9-to-5 job at the office and get, as he put it, his living free. Anyhow, the deal was that Maggie kept the big house for the folks and watched their kids for them, and Chuck maintained the grounds. The various disasters of that time would fill a book. Yeah, a lot of fun things happened back then. So I'm going to skip ahead over here to the garden part. Earlier this particular spring, Watmore, though increasingly leery of Chuck for reasons we shall see, had pitched a proposition to him to the effect that if he, Chuck, would provide the labor, then he, Watmore, would spring for all the seeds and plantings needed to plant a community vegetable patch that both families could use. Chuck went for it. Now he could not only live free, but he and Maggie and the kids could also now eat free. So there is just a tiny, tiny sliver, smidgen of the story of some of my father's possum living. And I think my grandfather's stories are even more interesting, but we'll get to those someday. Let's go back to the journal. And there she is, Miss Awesome Possum Journal. And if you listen to the story about Possum Living, now you know why I put in the brown paper bags. Because that's a found material, right? That's free stuff from the store. So I had to add that in. And the paper is from the flea market, which was very cheap. And most of this other stuff was gifted to me. So I have my 2 signatures sewn in. I love this possum. Awesome illustrations in the Awesome Possum Journal. Lots of white space I can cover up with something. I got more possum pictures. And, you know, I don't put a lot of pockets and ephemera and things on because I'll do that as I journal on each page. And that's just the way I do it. And with the little card there, I sewed a piece of scrapbook paper in as a pocket. And on the back, I sewed the 2 cards together like that and made a little tuck there. So that is it. This Awesome Possum Journal is ready to rock and roll. So thanks for coming along today for a little bit of junk journaling, getting this journal together, and a little bit of storytelling about Possum Living, and a little bit of story time about my mom and dad. Happy junk journaling. Bye-bye.